Winchester rifles are known as the guns that won the American Wild West. Many old guns have quite a past, and it shows. Dents, scratches, and missing parts make a gun look ready for the junkyard. But old guns can be restored, lock, stock, and barrel. A vintage firearm may have been used in a historic battle or to hunt for food. Winchester rifles were one of the first repeating rifles, guns that held multiple rounds for a much greater rate of fire. To restore a century-old Winchester, they disassemble it and evaluate every part. They decide the gun needs a major overhaul, beginning with the shoulder stock. The master gunsmith assesses pieces of American black walnut for a new stock and decides on one. He then selects a wooden template of a shoulder stock. He traces the template's contours onto the blank using a grease pencil. He leaves a generous margin for error. He cuts the walnut blank with a bandsaw, following the pencil profile. These bandsaw cuts remove excess wood. They also give him a basic shape to work with. Next, he clamps the walnut piece in a duplicator beside the shoulder stock template. He follows the shape of the template with a stylus. The stylus controls a router that cuts into the wood. As he follows the lines of the gun stock template, the router moves in sync to duplicate the shape. It also reveals the beautiful grain of the black walnut. The template and walnut copy can be turned simultaneously. This allows the gunsmith to cover every angle with the stylus. It takes numerous passes to duplicate the shape. Next, he brushes black dye onto the receiver, which houses the rifle's operating parts. He slides the receiver into the new stock. The black dye transfers to the high spots of the wood, indicating where the fit is too tight. He scrapes the wood in those locations so the receiver fits more precisely into the stock. This process is known as inletting. He now refines the shape of the shoulder stock using a coarse file. He also evens any rough patches created by the duplicator. He switches to a finer file as he continues to shape the stock and smooth it. Finally, he sands the gun stock to a uniform texture. He stains both the stock and the forend. The forend is used to steady the rifle during firing. Once the stain has dried, he applies an oil finish. This both protects the wood and enhances the grain. The finish can make all the difference. Here we see finished stocks in low to high-grade wood. Next, a craftsman engraves a checkered pattern into the forend of the stock. He etches a series of grooves, creating an outline to work with. Then he carves parallel grooves on crisscross angles to form the checkered pattern. This checkering adds visual interest and gives the rifle a better grip. Stay tuned for more as this vintage gun restoration continues. Restoring old guns was long considered taboo. It was believed that tampering with antique firearms would diminish their value. That view is changing. Gun restoration can save it from the junkyard, preserving a piece of the past. Many old guns have a checkered pattern on the stock and forend. To replicate the originals, the gunsmith has etched a checkered pattern into the wood. He now darkens the checkered sections with black linseed oil. The oil highlights and protects the design. The focus then turns to the rifle's metal parts, made of low-carbon steel. After over a century of use, the finish has worn off, compromising their strength. Restoration begins with the receiver. It holds the gun's working parts. He files off imperfections. Then he polishes the receiver using an abrasive cloth wrapped around a block. He uses progressively finer abrasives. This greatly improves the surface. Here is the rifle receiver before it was filed and sanded, and after. He also cleans up the trigger, lever, and other parts. After a hardening treatment, the gunsmith applies varnish. The varnish enhances the swirl of colors created by the hardening treatment. This is a classic look. Here's the rifle receiver in the different stages of restoration. Next, a gunsmith bolts a roll die into a press. He then loads the newly polished rifle barrel into the press and activates it. This press rolls lettering into the metal. This stamped information is known as the barrel address. It includes the company name and original date of manufacture. Another team member boils the barrel in hot soapy water to remove any dirt or grime. After a rinse, he slides the barrel onto a fixed rod. He wipes off the water residue and heats the barrel with a torch. This preheat prepares the barrel for a rust-proofing treatment called rust bluing. As he brushes the bluing solution onto the rifle barrel, he maintains a steady heat. The hot temperature activates the chemicals, and the metal turns a brown hue. Next, he boils the barrel in hot water. Its color goes from brown to bluish black. He repeats the rust bluing treatment 6 to 8 times. Then he brushes it against a wire wheel to get rid of excess residue. This century-old gun barrel is as good as new. Sometimes they engrave a gun's receiver with scrollwork or other designs. The engraver cuts the steel entirely by hand. He views his work through a microscope to get every detail right. He also engraves manufacturer's name and model number into the tang of the rifle receiver. It's delicate work that he has only one chance to get right. Elaborate engravings on the rifle receiver aren't necessary, but are a nice addition. The client decides whether to keep it simple or go fancy. Restoring a vintage rifle isn't cheap. It costs thousands of dollars or more if expensive engravings and gold inlay work is added. But when it comes to extras, some collectors won't hesitate to pull the trigger. If you have any comments about the show, or if you'd like to suggest topics for future shows, drop us a line at sciencechannel.com/howitsmade.